Okay. First of all, I just want to ask a quick thing before I get to the interview questions. Would it be all right if I record this interview and put it on YouTube so I can link it to my college blog?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. 2 seconds. Thanks very much for getting back to me, by the way.
No problem. It's fine.
Thank you. Okay. So first question. Um, so when would you say you first discovered your love for writing? When did you decide this is what I want to do?
So I think I started writing around the age of 9 or 7. My mum can't quite remember which it is. But I always loved writing. I was a big reader, and I read every book in my school library. And I think what happened was I wanted to create my own stories, where I was the hero to begin with. And in fact, I think the first character I ever created was Narat, which is my name backwards. And yeah, I've just been writing ever since. I took a bit of a break at university from writing, but yeah, pretty much ever since I was really young.
Cool. That's great. So the next question is which one of your pieces of work or projects or books or whatever, which of your projects are you most proud of, would you say?
Well, The Novice was my first completed and published novel,
Yeah.
and I'm very proud of what that book has helped me achieve. But I think I'm proudest of The Inquisition, which is the sequel, because I think it is a better book. I think I really evolved as a writer after book one, and book two is something that I'm really proud. I'm proud of both, but I'd say I'm more proud of The Inquisition as a final piece of work, and hopefully the Battle Mage, which is the next book, will be I'll be even prouder of. But it's kind of hard to say until I start hearing what people thought of it.
Well, I personally am very excited for the Battle Mage. I'm very excited. So did you get to where you are today, would you say? So how were you picked up? How were you discovered, I would say? How did you get to where you are?
So I was studying business at Bath University, and I got an email through saying that Penguin were doing uh, a kind of workshop with students to kind of headhunt business people to come in and work in publishing, because they found that there was um, a lack of business people in that industry. Most of people working in the industry are English literature and history grads. So they wanted to get people with a kind of business mindset in, and they did a presentation where they mentioned how the industry is changing and how publishers are kind of working towards a phenomenon based business model where most books kind of make them a good amount of money, and then one kind of book will break out and make them an absolute fortune.
Yeah.
And how there's different websites, different ways of reading and growing, how there's a rise of an ebook, the ebook situation, and how that's putting pressure on publishing, that kind of thing. And Wattpad was one of the websites that came up. And after the event, I went up and shook his hand, the presenter, and told him that I was a writer as well as a business person. And the first thing he said was, "Well, you should stick it on Wattpad." So then there were 5,000. Sorry, I'm giving you a very long-winded answer. I hope you don't mind.
It's fine.
There were 5,000 applicants for 4 roles that he was advertising. Um, I managed to snag one of those roles, and I worked at Penguin for 2 months. In fact, it was Penguin Random House. I arrived on the day that Penguin and Random House merged, and it was very eye-opening. I kind of saw how the industry was run. I got some idea of how books are acquired and how publishers determine how many copies they think a book will sell, and that's usually based on the similarity of that book to other books that have sold as well, while also maintaining a kind of uniqueness about them as well. And so that was very interesting to me. And I also realized that writers were not people who had gone away and studied how to write a book. The vast majority of the authors that I met had never studied writing or taken a course in their lives. They were just someone who had a passion for storytelling, and wanted to write a book. and it had become published. So I finished my time at Penguin Random House, and I was going to go backpacking in Australia about a month after I left. So I had a month to kill. And I'd always been pestering my boss to say, could you put me in touch with an editor here at Penguin? Maybe, maybe they'd be interested in some of my writing. But he didn't really want me to be pestering editors there. So he kept saying, oh, put it on Wattpad, put it on Wattpad. I don't think he really thought that my book would be very successful on there or anything like that. I think he was quite surprised when what happened. Really, it was more of a way of saying, leave me alone and try this instead. But it was interesting because to be honest, Wattpad for me, I'd studied it as part of my part of what I'd been doing at Penguin Random House. And I saw that there were a few people who had managed to get book deals, but that mostly they had several million reads, and they were, by far in the minority. There were people like Abigail Gibbs and Beth Reekles, but they were both British, and that was kind of inspiring as well. And they weren't the kind of books that I write. They are more, targeted towards the teenage girl market, and that's what mostly Wattpad is made up of, teenage girls. One Direction fan fiction is probably one of the most popular categories on the website, and that's clearly targeted towards teenage girls. So I didn't necessarily think I'd do very well on there, but I had this kind of dream, and when I started the book, I had a kind of little disclaimer saying my ultimate aim is to get this book published, and that was in the book description. So the first chapter, I put it up on Wattpad, and to begin with, I didn't really get much feedback or interaction with anyone. I put up a cover that I made on MS Paint. It was pretty rubbish. And this guy from Indonesia, he went by like Achilles 33 or something like that. He was commenting on every one of my chapters. His English was not the best, but it was inspiring to me that somebody was reading my work. And I kept going, and then something kind of weird started to happen. I changed the cover. I was uploading a chapter every day. So I was taking part in National Novel Writing Month, known as NaNoWriMo, where you try and write 50,000 words in a month. And so that's what I was doing. So every day I'd put a chapter up, and I promised my readers that I would put up a chapter every single day. And I think that was part of the appeal of the book, was that every day they'd have something new to read. And I just kept uploading. And by the end of the month, it had gone a bit viral. It hit 100,000 reads. Then I went backpacking across Australia. I reduced my upload rate from once a day to once a week, then every 2 weeks. The internet out where I was backpacking around Australia was terrible. So really, it was just kind of like find somewhere on a Friday to upload, and then not really having much access for the rest of that week. But eventually, after 4 months after I put the first chapter up, I hit 1 million reads. I was back from Australia. And a journalist got in touch with me pretty soon afterwards saying, hey, I'm doing a piece on serialized fiction. Would you mind if I included you in an article? We had a very quick interview, done a terrible connection on the phone. Wasn't sure how much he'd heard of what I'd said, but he mentioned me. He used some of my concept art, and that was on NBC News. So and that was cool. And for some reason I expected my reads to just kind of blow up, but actually no one really checked it out. But what did happen was Audible got in touch pretty much the day after the article came out, saying they were interested in buying the audiobook rights. And that was when I knew I had to start focusing on taking myself seriously. The book wasn't finished, and generally the rule is if you don't have a finished book, you don't approach agents. So what I did was I approached a few agents just asking for advice. I wasn't saying, will you represent me? I just said, look, I've got this audiobook offer on a book that's only half finished. What should I do? Should I wait? And I also knew from my time at Penguin Random House that if you sell audiobook rights, your chances at a book deal are reduced, because some publishers will only consider an offer if audiobook rights are on the table. So I think HarperCollins is one of them, where if you don't have audiobook rights for them, then they'll say no. So to cut a long story short, I asked some agents for advice. They all seemed very interested. I had a brief meeting with someone at Penguin that my boss had put me in touch with, and he just gave me a list of 3 names of the best agents in the UK for my genre. I messaged all of them saying, hello, I'm in this situation, what should I do? They all offered to represent me. I had 3 offers from the US, 3 offers from the UK. I chose one of the UK agents, Juliet Mushins, who's an excellent agent, and she put my book out to lots of publishers around the world. And since then, the book's been translated into 13 languages. I've had multiple six-figure deals. I've both of my books have become New York Times bestsellers, The Novice and The Inquisition. I now write for a living, and it's just been a kind of roller coaster ride. And I now consider writing a career, and it's something I'm very passionate about. And it's just all worked out very nicely. Yeah.
Great answer. Thank you. Next question, a little bit different. Obviously you're a writer, so obviously you work with words a lot. What would you say is your favourite word and why?
Wow, that is tricky. I guess might be a word that I used yesterday, which is susurration, which is the sound of the wind kind of blowing through the grass. I like it because it sounds quite a lot like what the sound it's describing is. So yeah.
Cool. So, what would you consider? What do you think makes a successful, like, Wattpad account or any social media account, really?
So I have, I think Wattpad and general social media are two separate beasts. I'm not particularly adept at using Twitter and Facebook and things. I do use them, but I know there's some people who are way better than me at using those. I do upload concept art and things like that on social media, and I think that that's quite well appreciated by my readership and gets me new followers. But I think on Wattpad, there's I have an advice book on my Wattpad profile where I tell everyone kind of my secrets to success on Wattpad. I'd say the main thing to do on Wattpad to be successful is write short chapters, upload frequently, let the readership know how often you update in the title of the book itself. So, for example, if your book was called The Novice, you would put The Novice brackets updated on Fridays. So they know to check to read your book on Fridays. At the end of every chapter, leave an author's note reminding them to vote if they enjoyed the chapter, and respond to every comment. To begin with, I would reply. Every single person who votes on your book, I would go on their wall and leave them a comment saying thank you for voting, to encourage them to continue, and get involved in the community, get on the forums. They're called clubs, but they're basically forums on Wattpad. Interact with people. There's places where you can advertise your book on there, that kind of stuff. And hopefully what will happen is that through all this effort, and also through sharing with all your friends and family and getting that kind of initial maybe 60 reads on your book as soon as you upload it, that will get Wattpad's algorithm to notice that your book is doing well. And it will then propel your book into being seen by more people. If you have a bad cover, people are less likely to click on your book when it's put in front of them on the app, when a random book appears in their kind of suggestions box. So it's good. It's important to have a good cover. And also another thing that I believe the algorithm takes into account is that if your readership drops quite dramatically with every chapter that they read, Wattpad notices that and perhaps gives you shares your book less across their platform as an algorithm. I mean, not somebody at Wattpad sitting deciding. So if your book has a very dedicated readership and the drop-off rate isn't huge, the algorithm also notices that. So it's all about frequency of updates, how quickly you get an initial readership, how many of them vote, and how many of them stick with your story. And that's kind of a bit of how the algorithm picks it up and pushes it out. And then hopefully the more it's pushed out, the more readers you'll get, and the higher and higher up it will go. And you'd need a good cover for that. And that's very important.
Okay. So where would you say you find most of your inspiration for like any of your projects?
So I'm a big history buff. So the next two books I'm writing are very kind of historically focused, even though they don't take place in actual historical times. So the next series that I've just done a contract with Hachette and Macmillan to write 3 books in a new series, and they will feature various groups of people from different time periods. In fact, I have a giant list of every missing group of people from history ever. So, for example, the Ninth Legion or Camby's the Second's Army, all these kind of famous disappearances. I've made a huge list of them, and those groups will kind of feature whether they're alive or their remains are kind of found in the new series. And I'm also writing a different book. It's kind of a side project. No one's contracted me to do it, and I'm kind of taking my time with it, which is a kind of virtual reality game set in Dark Age Britain around the time of the Saxon invasions. So history is a big part of it. Everything I like about fantasy often makes its way into my book. So everything I like about science fiction. I'm not saying that I'm taking other people's concepts and putting them into my work. It's more stuff that inspires me and allows me to put my own kind of twist on it. So, and that's one of my kind of processes is I think organically things that I really like about science fiction make their way into my books, science fiction and fantasy. And then I guess there's personal experiences. That's also a big one. Stuff that I've experienced as a child, growing up, and now people that I've interacted with, people I've met, global issues, things that matter to me, social justice, social change, economic inequality, all of those things will often make their way into my books as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool, interesting. So what would you say is your favourite book of all time, or who's your favourite author of all time?
So that has changed several times over the years, as is normal, I would suspect. So it started with Harry Potter, and then it kind of transitioned to Taran for a while, who writes kind of horror vampire novels, not the Twilight vampires, but kind of gritty, darker vampires. And then it moved to Wilbur Smith, who writes kind of historical fiction. And then also Bernard Cornwell, who writes historical fiction, and the Sharpe series, which is set in the kind of Napoleonic Wars, and even before that time. That inspired a lot of the kind of time periods that the Novice takes place in. So Bernard Cornwell and Wilbur Smith, and I still very much enjoy their books. But recently I read a book called Ready Player One, which is being made into a feature film by Steven Spielberg right now, and it sold very, very well. And I'm a huge fan of that, and it's partly inspired my that kind of side project that I'm working on with virtual reality games. And that is currently my favorite book, and it's the one I recommend to a lot of people.
It's a really good book.
Oh, I'm glad you like it too.
What job do you think you would be doing if you weren't a writer full time?
So my family are in business, specifically kind of property, and I would probably have ended up working in that industry after graduating if I hadn't got into publishing and kind of seen what I saw there, and if I didn't have a passion for writing and reading. I mean, to be honest, my entire life I'd always thought that I'd write a book, it would be published, and it wouldn't make me much money, and it would be kind of a hobby that happened to be published. But I guess it turned out that the success I found as a writer has allowed me to focus on it fully, and I feel very fortunate to be able to do that, because the vast majority of authors would find it impossible to go full time, and those that do go full time often supplement their income by doing school visits for most of the year, promoting their books, selling their books, and receiving kind of speaker fees for that. So I'm very, very fortunate that I'm able to make a living as a writer.
Cool. So next question would be, how do you select the names of your characters in your books?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I kind of look, so it's kind of names that I think are cool, and I find them in various ways. I've gone through kind of old British names on memorials, for example, to try and find kind of old school names from British history, names like Montgomery and Isadora and Tarquin, that kind of stuff. I like Latin names. I find those interesting. So, for example, I've looked at star names. Kind of, they always get really cool names, stars actually, and astronomers have great fun naming stars with the coolest kind of Latin names that they can come up with. So Arcturus, for example, is one of the characters in the Summoner series, and that comes from a star. Then there's kind of historical names. I like kind of ancient Viking names. I like ancient British names, that kind of thing. And I have made up. I like Shakespearean names as well, actually, names that Shakespeare uses. So it comes from a vast kind of many different places. But that's for a fantasy series like the Summoner series. My next two books are one set in the future and the other one set in like our current time period. And so it would be weird for people to have kind of very strange names kind of scattered throughout. So I would probably just look at baby names websites, coming up with names there.
Yeah. Okay. How much research would you say you do before like writing a book? I mean, I know with certain genres you might not have to do as much, but like how much research would you say you do before like putting pen to paper?
Well, for the Summoner series, I did very little kind of written down research. I kind of wrote it for a bit of fun, and then as the series evolved, I started doing tons of research on mythological creatures from around the world. So I have a massive database of mythical creatures from different cultures all over the world, and that's kind of come together into a demonology that I'm having illustrated and hopefully will eventually be published. So that's probably the main component of research for the Summoner series, and then also weaponry and how weaponry works, blacksmithing and how blacksmithing works. That's also come into play. Because it's set in the 18th century. I read a lot of historical fiction set around that time period. I mean, it's not actually set in Earth's 18th century, but it's set in a time period in another world around what would be the 18th century there. So that's something that I did for the Summoner series. For the next two books, it's mostly historical. I've done a lot of research. I could probably publish books with my research on the different missing groups of missing people. I think I must have over 300 groups of mysteriously missing people, objects, and things. And obviously, every single different one of those groups has a different historical background and comes from a different culture. And I've had to, for the ones that will feature most heavily in the books, I've had to research those. So I've researched everything from, the different types of dinosaur to different eras of the Roman Empire to ancient Greece to the Second World War to, are there tea-making facilities in a World War II tank? That kind of stuff. So there's a vast amount of research that I've done. I've even had to research kind of like planetary alignments and how would it be possible for a planet the size of Earth to have a ring around it? And if there was a ring around it, what would it look like from different parts of the world? Is it possible to have two tidally locked moons at the same time? And if there were, how would that impact the way that the tides are? That kind of crazy stuff. And you end up going into a rabbit hole of research that takes up way more of your time than you thought it would, but is also quite fun and interesting. So I don't mind doing it. So when I started, I didn't do much research, and gradually as time has gone by, I have researched more and more. I wonder whether that's just me procrastinating or whether it's because the book really needs me to know these things.
Yeah. Cool. Final question is, second to last question. How important would you say your audience's feedback and opinions are, like when deciding on what to work on next?
God, that's tough. I mean, it's very tricky to kind of survey people to find out what projects they'd most like you to work on and that kind of stuff. And if you did, I mean, it's just not done, really. I've never heard of an author kind of going out and saying to their fans, "What should I write next?" But you do get a sense of what your readers like. So, for example, I have found when looking at the also boughts on Amazon on my books in the UK and the US, two completely different markets, they both have many readers who are reading a genre known as lit RPG, which is basically what Ready Player One is. People playing virtual reality games or games, somebody's being sucked into a game world, or just a book very much inspired by video games. And across the board, for many different territories, looking on Amazon and various other places, you'll see that people who are reading those books are reading mine as well. And they're almost all self-published because publishers aren't particularly interested in publishing that at the moment. I'm not sure why. Maybe we'll find out someday. But what I found is that people like my books because partly because of the video game experience. That's one of the reasons why I'm writing this kind of virtual reality game side project. And then the other one, I feel like my fans will enjoy because ultimately I write books that I would enjoy myself.
Yeah.
And hopefully, if people like the Summoner series and they're like me, then they would also like the new series I'm writing. So that's one thing. And then taking advice from people who aren't writers about how to write a book and what's going to happen in your book is not particularly useful sometimes.
Yeah.
You can find out what their likes and dislikes are, but if you ask them about plots and things like that, they will tell you the wrong thing very often. For example, there is a scene in the first book of The Novice where Fletcher, the main character, finds out what his power level is, what his summoning level is, which determines how many demons he can summon and how powerful the demons he can summon are. And he finds out that he's level 9. And then you find out that the baddies in the book, his kind of various kind of antagonists, they also find out how powerful they are, and they are kind of level 15, level 16, much stronger than Fletcher is. And I had a massive kind of outcry from the readers all saying, why is Fletcher's level so low? You should make him twice as powerful as the antagonist. He should be able to destroy them easily. And that's what they wanted. They wanted the main character to be super powerful and strong and amazing and everything to be hunky-dory for him. But that makes for a very boring book.
Yeah.
If the bad guys are easily destroyed by the main character, then there's not much tension there. Game of Thrones would be a very boring book if all the characters that people liked stayed alive and had a very nice and happy life. So often readers don't necessarily know what they want or what makes for a good story. But what is useful is when they say stuff like, oh, we saw that character earlier and I really liked him. I'd love to see more of him. That's useful. And that's something that I heard from Wattpad. But when it comes to more specific things, sometimes readers don't know what they want.
Okay. So final question. Do you think the invention of sites like Wattpad have made it easier for people to get noticed and picked up, or do you think it's harder because there are a lot more people trying to get noticed?
I mean, when I joined, Wattpad was still immensely popular. I joined around the time where Wattpad had kind of already hit its stride, as it were. I think the competition's probably a little bit fiercer now, but not much more than when I was there. I think Wattpad, if I had a finished book, a completely finished book, that I was ready to try and get published, I would not put it on Wattpad. I would make it as good a book as it could be, and then I'd approach agents and publishers in the traditional way. If I had a book that I hadn't written yet, that I wanted encouragement to help me write it, and I wanted to maybe get a bit of an edge on perhaps getting an agent later down the line, maybe I would put it on Wattpad. But if you only got, say, a few thousand reads on your book, but the encouragement helped you finish it, then I would simply delete it from Wattpad or unpublish it from Wattpad and just query it in the traditional way, and nobody needs to know it was ever there. And then I would, if it got more than, say, 500,000 reads, then perhaps it would be worth approaching agents and saying the book got 500,000 reads on Wattpad, and maybe they will take a little bit more notice of your book. Although there is kind of, if you've put your entire book up and it's been there for a year and then it got 500,000 reads, that might actually work against you. So it's a tricky balance, and I'd say Wattpad's more good for encouragement. It's better for helping you finish your book. And maybe if it goes viral and get several million reads, then you probably have an advantage. But ideally, that would happen before the entire book has been posted on Wattpad. And that's what happened with me. And I think generally when your book has been posted in its entirety on Wattpad, and then it's been sitting there for several months, and then it hits many reads, that makes your book less attractive to an agent or a publisher. And that's something to bear in mind. But it's a great community. It's very positive. It's great for feedback and encouragement. And I'd say, especially if you're young and perhaps know that your writing's not necessarily good enough to get published yet, but one day it will be, Wattpad's a great place to share your work, make friends who are also writers, join a community, encourage yourself to write more than you do, improve your writing, that kind of stuff. And I think that's what Wattpad's great for. And I think I would have potentially had a much happier and more productive childhood if Wattpad had existed when I was younger. And I would have been a massive kind of power user of Wattpad if it had been around when I was younger.
Yes. Thanks. That was a really good answer. I completely agree with what you said about the Wattpad thing. The community is great.
Yeah. I mean, the sad thing about Wattpad, unfortunately, is that at the moment it's very hard for an author to communicate with their fan base via any other method than updating within the story itself. If you wanted to message all your readers, it's very difficult.
Yeah. Just want to say thanks very much for the interview, by the way. I really appreciate you getting back to me.
No worries. You're welcome. I hope that it helps you do what you need to do with the university thing and stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the Battle Mage as well. So.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I am too. I mean, I finished it like almost a year ago. I'm always a year behind, so it's almost like I finished it a year ago. Nobody's read it, but like maybe 5 or 6 people, and it's quite nerve-wracking when it's going to come out, and you're going to see what people actually thought of it. But you've also it's been so long since you finished it that you've almost taken a bit of a step back from it, and it's not as nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So I mean, to be honest, in the days up until the book's release, I am mostly panicking about finishing my next book because I'm writing. So I've been commissioned for a 4th book in the Summoner series, but it's not about Fletcher. It's about Arcturus, and it's set in a time when Arcturus is a student. And so that's what I'm writing at the moment. And so it's almost kind of helps distract me from the pressure of the fact that a new book's going to come out because I'm so busy trying to finish that next book in time. Because my deadline is always on the day of the next book's release.
Right, yes.
The day that the Battle Mage comes out, I'll have to be emailing my editor saying, "Here is the final version of the Outcast, as it's going to be called."
Yeah. Cool. Oh, I just have one more question, actually, if that's okay.
Sure.
Who would you say is your favourite character from the Summoner series?
So Fletcher is a lot like me. He kind of fights against injustice a lot, and I think Fletcher is kind of like my I wouldn't say inner child. I'd say he's like my inner younger self, perhaps. But Othello I share more experiences with Othello, and I think Othello's my more mature and slightly more serious side. Because I was one of the only Asian students at my school when I was younger, and Othello has a very similar experience to me. And I think that I identify with Othello more sometimes than Fletcher. So those are my 2 kind of favorite characters. And Captain Lovett, who's one of the teachers, is kind of inspired by my mother, who who raised me. So she's also a favorite of mine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your interview again, and thanks for getting back to me. I'm looking forward to reading the Battle Mage for sure. Thank you. I'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next time. Bye.